Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Connection Project. I'm here today and I am so excited. I've been anticipating this all day. I have this amazing woman here with me, Jen Liss, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about her. She's a life coach, a trauma-informed breathwork facilitator, and a founder of Brilliant Breathwork. If you haven't checked it out yet, please do that. It's a membership and coaching community showing people how to untether from past experiences, reprogram the mind and the body, and unleash the brilliance within. And she is a high energy, and I met Jen. So I talk like I've known her forever, but I kind of do feel a bit of a connection. We literally met in breathwork training for pause. We were in a breakout room together, and that was how we met. That was it. That little spark. I knew then she was doing her podcast, Untethered. I was had a little, not jealousy, that's a bad word, a little bit like, oh, wow, a podcast. And here am I, who knows even what I'm doing, but here I am with my podcast, and full circle. Um, I participated with her month for Brilliance for Breathwork, where she really just dug into breathwork for a month. And this just goes to show you, no matter if you are doing the same similar things, like we are women supporting women in this community, that's part to me about connection. And I can get into a whole thing about that, and maybe we'll touch on it later. But yeah, I ended up helping out there, just sat through a beautiful virtual retreat with her, post her Brilliance for Breathwork. And so when I was making my list of who do I want to talk to first about connection in the beginning of my journey here on this podcast, Jen's name came right up to me. So Jen, welcome. I am so happy to have you here today. Super excited for this.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. And 100%, I feel like I've known you forever and I can't even explain it because we only know so much about each other. And yet I feel like I know so much about you and you know so much about me. So it's pretty
I know.
magical when that happens.
I know. I love it. I love it. And you were definitely, I was definitely like, yeah, I need to have her on right off the bat and really talk about all things connection, because you're doing some amazing work. And some of our work is similar, but that's what the beauty of, I think, creating these communities, because so many times, and I've been in many communities where women sometimes, now all the women out there are probably gonna get mad at me, but women sometimes, if we're being honest with ourselves, we are not so nice to each other. Or we live in this hustle mentality, this masculine mentality where we have to kind of step over each other to rise, right? And that I am learning, and I am starting to learn that that is not a truth. Like, we are here to connect, to cultivate our relationships, to lift each other up. And we all have our unique medicine and energy, so people will be attracted to us for different reasons, even doing the same thing. And so I love what you're doing. And yeah, so just a little bit about that, because I think that that piece is so important, and we don't always want to talk about it because then we have to think that we're not that person. But I have been that person, like that jealous person, that little Judy, I call her. She's a little judgy. She comes out. She's one of my people. She's one
Yes,
of my
Judy.
fragmented pieces. She comes out and she gets a little judgy, like, oh. And that is something I have been actively working on. So that being said, connection. This is what I'm asking all my people that are coming on. Like, what does connection mean to you? Um, and how has that impacted you?
Yeah. I want to comment just very briefly on what you just said about women. We've taken on this competitive edge of the masculine and it's not serving us and cutting each other off at the knees. It's wild how we do it. I've done it. I think it's so freaking powerful and awesome that you're straight up speaking this out loud because so many of us have done it. I find myself still doing it and I'm like, what the crap is this? It's time to stop that because we it's Snoop Dogg of all people who said this, but when you continue to rise, you invite your other homies to come up and rise with you. And I want all of us to rise, man. It's ridiculous.
100%. I wasn't even going to talk about it, but honestly, as I was reading your bio, I'm like, we do so many similar things, right? I don't know all the intricacies of exactly what you do, but the breath work alone is a similarity, right? And how much we are helping our clients get back into their bodies through breath and through other modalities. And we both, I know, think it's so, so, so important, that connection to our breath and to our body. Um, but yeah, as I was reading your bio, I don't know, I just got like a download. Like, I just have to say this, like, and I know sometimes people don't like to hear it. I sometimes don't like to hear it or even think it about myself, but it's true. It's true. And especially when you're in the world of entrepreneur, like all your wounds and all your stuff starts to come out. And so, yeah, I think facing it and being like, yeah, man, this happens. And how am I going to show up differently? And it doesn't happen overnight because it's a lot of embedded, I think, a lot of embedded thought processes and programming. And, as women, we've, I guess, moved along the spectrum of we didn't have a voice. And then we created this, we got this voice, and then feminism came on, and then we like this badass entrepreneur, like I can do it and I can do it better than you. And I'm not saying any of that is bad, but now really stepping into like feminine leadership of it doesn't have to be a grind. I don't have to step on you to succeed. Let's all rise like Snoop Dogg. Let's bring all of us up together. And that retreat you just did was a beautiful piece of that. Another thing I wasn't even thinking of talking about, but it was to watch three women support each other, bring their gifts to the world in that 3 hours. It was really, really beautiful to be part of and to watch. And it really resonated with me. And it is a piece of what I'm after, like what I'm after in this entrepreneurial journey. When you stop the comparison, you connect with others, and then you see where you can actually go with that,
Yeah.
because the sky's the limit for us, um, showing up differently.
There's enough pie for all of us. For
Yeah,
anybody
there
who's
it
an
is.
entrepreneur, there is enough pie for all of us. And your client is different than my client. Different people are going to be attracted to you, who are attracted to me. And that's just the way that it goes. And if you want to face all of your stuff, become an entrepreneur, because yeah, it's going to stir it all up and you're going to face it, because in order to be successful, you've got to face
Who knew? No one
every
told
single
me
piece of
that.
it.
No one mentioned that. I was like, what
It's
is
better if you don't
happening?
know. It's better to just
What is
jump in and be
happening?
surprised.
Yeah, yeah, but it's
Yeah.
great.
So
Anyway.
to answer your question about connection, it really comes back to what you were saying about us three women. I recently did a retreat and Sally came and was part of it, and it was amazing and magical. And it was three people coming together and sharing our gifts with others. And I believe that is what connection is about. It is us sharing one another's sparkly magic. And the other side of connection, like it is sparkly magic connection. Like connecting with other people is like fireworks, amazing magic. And it's also hard as hell. It's hard as hell to connect with other people. It's hard as hell to offer your gifts. It's so freaking vulnerable and painful and hard to do it. And so I feel like connection is such an interesting topic that you're podcasting on and that you're really diving into here, because there's a dichotomy that's happening with it. It's like it's everything, and it's also everything that's so hard.
Right. It's everything, it's nothing, it's in between. I think I brought up when I first was speaking about this even came to me about, it was just really around technology and like how we're disconnected because of technology, but we're connected because of technology. And I didn't want the podcast to be just about technology versus not technology, but that's what spurred it in my brain. My crazy brain was like, can it be both? Can there be connection, disconnection? Can there be technology, but can everybody be at the dinner table, be on their phone and nobody communicating? Can we be present on this call today and feel so connected? Because I feel like zing connected to you, even though we're on Zoom and it's technology, and I could be in the room with a family member and be in the same room and be disconnected. And like, what is that all about? And where do we start? And what are people's takes on that? Because it's not just my take. And I just think it was a conversation that needs to really start happening, on so many levels.
Yeah. And I feel this, what you just shared. One of the things in my journey has been that in my family, we love each other so much. My family's so close. And people would look at my family and say, I remember my aunt saying to my mom, I just wish my kids were as close as your kids. And yet, there is a layer at which in my family, we aren't deeply, like truly vulnerable and honest with one another. So there is this, even within my own life. And this is something I've been dissecting for myself because I realized, well, this starts with me. And how deeply am I connected to myself in a way that I would be okay with opening up to my own family members about, certain things. It's like, how am I showing up in like each of those ways? Like, where am I being really connected and where am I completely disconnected? It's a powerful conversation to start to have, Sally.
It is, and it made me when you just said that, I thought of a couple just incidents recently in my own life where we are connected, but is there really that vulnerability if that's piece is what we're going to bring in for true connection? And I'm not saying that we should shame ourselves based on how vulnerable we are or not. Everybody is not going to do the deep dive. Everybody is not ready to be sharing all their emotions, right? I just started to even realize what that word meant a couple of years ago. So I don't expect everybody to just open up in the family realm or the friend realm or because people have to be ready, but where does that piece of vulnerability, even letting ourselves be vulnerable? I can see myself sometimes still now as I'm on my own healing journey, um, shutting down, being like, "Oh, I don't know, right here." Like it gets awkward, like because I have old programming and it gets awkward. And other days I'm like, "Oh, like today, like, it's all out." But it just depends on, like, if something triggers me or where I'm at. So, definitely not shaming anybody that's not ready to create that vulnerability, but that vulnerability creates such deep connection, but a lot of us, myself included, feel a bit unsafe to do that, right? And so we talk about safety in the body with our breath work and creating safety within ourselves, but it's not like I don't think it's that people don't wanna share, don't wanna be vulnerable. I think I felt unsafe to do it. I felt like this doesn't feel good. This is awkward. Um, and so it created a lot of disconnection in my relationships. Like I had
Yeah.
relationships, but they weren't really deep. Let's say that, right? Because vulnerability helps with that. But also knowing that everybody's in a different place and that we have to be understanding of that also. Like within our family unit, like everybody's not ready.
Yeah, same. And I think, and we're both trauma informed facilitators, and we approach this in different ways, I'm sure, in our own ways. And there's ways in which we are probably very similar. And one of those is grounding in safety. I think that safety, we lack a lot of emotional safety in this world, and we don't recognize the places where we don't feel emotionally safe. And so even starting to question for your listeners who are like, what are they talking about with all this safety stuff? Like, where might I not feel safe to open up? And, being curious about what's happening there, I think that's a gateway to a lot of magic and a lot of magical new connection that we can be making with ourselves. And for me, too, what you said about, you know, not feeling safe to make deep connection, that was something that I set forth at the end of last year, was to connect at a deeper level with the people who I love. And what I found through this year was that, oh, the number one person who I love is me.
Yes.
And that's really where I need to dive deep, is here within myself. And then as I do that, I see it start to naturally reflect. I don't have to try to more deeply connect with other people. As I deeply connect with myself, it just starts to happen with other
Mm,
people because they feel safe. The safer you feel, you can hold that safety for other people too.
right. That's Yeah, that's juicy, right? For me, that's really juicy. I like that. And that is so true. I found that for myself, right? always thought it was external. And once I started to really dive into my own self-loathing versus self-love, um, yeah, my other relationships just started to improve. I didn't really even have to work on them that hard because it just that energetic piece of me really rippled out to them. That doesn't mean it's all rainbows and butterflies all the times. It just means it's easier than it was. And it's something that I have invested my time into. But can you, for our listeners, talk a little bit about the safety? Because I know I get on that bit about safety, but people don't sometimes, like you said, know what we're talking about with safety. So, was there a moment when you started to feel like maybe when you started to understand what that meant for yourself, the safety in your own body or the safety for your clients? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Like so many things, and this is why, Sally, I'm so passionate about breath work. I think it has to be felt. All things have to be felt for us to fully understand it. And then of course for us to heal it. Like you have to feel to heal. Well, we have to feel to really understand because we can get it. We can take in information. We can hear, oh, yes, safety. That is very important. I need to put on my seatbelt. But when you are
Right.
in a car and you're in a car wreck and that seatbelt actually holds your body physically in place and keeps you safe, that is a whole new knowing. And from then on, you put that damn seatbelt on every time you get in the car because you remember the felt sense of the safety of it holding you. So I think safety, it's like once we can viscerally feel the physical feeling of being safe in our body to go in and maybe touch something mentally with our awareness that we didn't feel previously safe to do, that is where you really discover, that's what it feels like to feel safe in my body. I can go in and touch this trigger and feel okay to do it. Because most of the time we're touching our triggers and we're recoiling instantly. It's like, oh, not cool, not cool, not
Right,
cool.
and sometimes we like for me, I can just say that I didn't even know. Like, if someone said to me, "Do you feel unsafe?" Even when I started therapy, if he said, "Do you f" we he might have said, "Do you feel unsafe?" And I was, "No, I'm not unsafe." Like, I didn't even
What
really
do you mean?
understand what that meant, right? That I was unsafe in my body. Fast forward 3 years later, and, I'll share this, I recently had a craniosacral. For anybody that doesn't know, it's an energy worker and they work on your head and your craniosacral. I'm not going to get all the intricacies because I'm not a craniosacral provider, but it is an amazing modality. And it was interesting because she said to me, How are you feeling today?" And I'm like, we were trading services. And I'm like, "Oh, I feel good." She said, "Are you nervous?" And I'm like, Nope. Nope, feel good. Love to have some energy work, love to be massaged or rubbed, or like I didn't feel awkward with her. And she said, "Really, you seem uncomfortable." And I was like, "Nope, not uncomfortable." So logically, my brain was like, "I'm fine." I was excited to go. I was fine, but my body, she was feeling it. It was a totally different story. And I've been on this journey for a while. And I was like, "Oh, interesting." Interesting for me, like, there is a bit of probably still some unsafe things in my body, it's a little disconnection, and it made me just be normally, I would have went into this spiral, but I didn't. I said to myself, "Okay, I've been taking care of a lot of people again lately, clients, people, and I really haven't been doing a lot of my own work." I had been doing breath work, with some apps, and I meditate every day, but I did have a lot of stuff going on in life, so I needed to probably amp up my self-care to create more safety in my body because here, this energy worker, she could feel it. And I got a little annoyed, not at her, but at myself because I'm like, oh shit. But I guess, yeah, and so our body has a story to tell. And so the expectation that I would think that just with a couple years of the work I've been doing, that I would not have this issue is kind of crazy because it was 50 some years of probably feeling unsafe. So it's a lot of muscle memory for me, for my body. And so you don't always logically know it even. Eventually, when you connect more, as we talk about, then um I know it, but even me with my connection with breath work, I guess looking back after there were signs and I was probably ignoring them again. Um, so I started to dig deep again and am feeling, better. But there's a lot there within our body and we just think it's all in our mind. So anyway, I didn't mean to get off on that, but it was
Yeah.
interesting because that just happened to me and I was feeling in my brain, everything is great, but she was like, no, ma'am.
Yeah, I have a great example of that myself from this morning. I sat down and I went to do this very short 5-minute daily check in and journaling that I do. And I checked in with myself and I said, oh, I feel rested. I feel at peace. And I was feeling really good. And then I was like, I'm going to do a quick check in with my leg muscles because I know that I tend to hold this tension in my leg muscles. I've been picking up a yoga practice again, which has helped me gain some new body awareness. And so I checked in with those leg muscles. They were like tight holding. And then I checked in with my hands. Every muscle in my body was tensed. Like I was waiting for something to hit me. I was completely tense. And my brain was like, you're so relaxed.
No, I know. And
Because
so,
my body was like so tense, like I'm just waiting.
mhm.
And so I used my brain. I reminded my brain to invite my muscles to relax. And I've been doing that throughout today. I was even doing it as you were just talking, like, oh, that reminder. Like, why am I tensing? There's something that my body is bracing for. We do this all the time.
Right. And so there is such a connection, mind body, you guys. The listeners will hear that like mind body connection, mind gut connection, all these different connections. And it was something we weren't looking at, I don't really think, until like now there's a lot of data. Um, some people think it's just all woo, as I call it, but it's not. There's so much data, breath work, and the connection. And it's true. I mean, I've experienced it. And what I had to learn was I can't expect it to be um, rectified overnight. I don't like to use the word fixed because then it implies I'm broken. And I try to utilize words that don't seem negative around this because it is just what it is, right? But being more aware, like you said, of your body, like my baseline is tense. So even though I've done a lot of modalities, I've incorporated them into my life. Um, It's it takes time. It takes time to really create that safety, and it gets easier and easier, and the awareness is helpful, right? I mean, the awareness of knowing like, "Hey, I'm doing this morning, but my let me check in with my legs." And I am tensing up, because we want our body to know, like, slowly that I can start to relax.
Yeah, it is safe to relax. I think all of us could be saying that to ourselves every single day and slowly witnessing what begins to happen in our body as we remind ourselves that it is safe. And that's something that you likely say in your breath sessions too. I say it in every breath session. Like, you are safe to breathe. You are safe to be in your body. You are safe to be here right now. We just aren't. That's the message that many of us didn't get as children, is simply you are safe just to be yourself.
Right.
And I think the more that we can hear that message from ourselves, from other people, and saying it with a YOU when you're talking to yourself, because that feels that's more believable sometimes to the brain, is hearing you, because then it feels like it's coming from another, which we tend to trust more sometimes than ourselves, can be really powerful. So if there's one thing that I can suggest to everyone to start to say to themselves, it's simply, you are safe, or you are safe to be yourself, because a lot of times we don't, and then we're all tightened up, which you and I were talking about this, Sally, right before we hopped on here. Two of the things, like, are a couple of our greatest assets, both of us, is that we can jump into action. Well, guess why we can jump into action? Because we're already tensed for the fight. We're
It's
already
so
like ready to
true.
spring.
It's so true. So if anyone out there is, I have brought this up maybe on a different podcast, but I thought that was a superpower that I could be a critical care nurse and be in the craziest situations. And I would put myself in the crazy situations because that's where I thrived. And I did not even know other people were nervous. And then I was almost bothered by the fact that they were nervous. I'm like, I'm handling it. Why are they nervous? um, not really understanding where they're coming from. And as they're watching me in the middle of this chaos, be fearful for me. But that is years of programming of being able to handle and be in situations as I was growing up and then as a young mom and having to navigate and keep everybody safe. And I was the person that was expected to do that eventually. So that gets imprinted in you. And then in your day to day, this is what happens. We become a certain way. Certain parts of us kept us safe. And so that's how we show up. And that's where sometimes we then have issues with connection or vulnerability or letting ourselves be heard because that really wasn't okay. And so our body remembers that, even if our mind knows logically, I'm safe. I'm in a healthy relationship. I had a good job. Um, I was self-sufficient, had a great husband. Everything was good when things kinda gave way to me, my panic attacks, my depression, my, like, complete disconnection with myself, but that was my body, I'm convinced, saying, like, "Enough. Like, you we've been telling you to, like, get it together, and you're not listening. So we're gonna stop you in your tracks," which is what happened. And so just having to
Beautiful.
dive through that, right? But I wouldn't have said I felt unsafe. So for the listeners out there, you're not sometimes you don't know um that that's even the case.
Yeah. I
So
mean,
that's
because
where
signs of feeling unsafe, all of those things that you experienced, the panic attacks, anxiety, things in your life kind of starting to crumble around you, all of those are symptoms of this more, base layer challenge that we're talking about of being disconnected from ourselves. And if you're disconnected from yourself, that feels unsafe.
yeah,
that's what
you don't
that's what a
even
lack of
know
safety feels like.
emotions. Forget that. Emotions, right? Like
Yeah.
who wants to talk about
And
that? Like I was
bottling
like
those up. Who needs to deal with those? That was legitimately, I said that to a friend in high school. She was like, "Why are you and Joey, who is now my husband?" She's like, "Why do you never fight?" And I was like, "Well, who needs to fight? Like I just don't feel any of the thing. Like I just let it roll off of me." And I actually heard my mom say something like this recently where she's like, "Yeah, I used to let that stuff bother me." And I paused. I said, "Me too." I said, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, me too." That was my response. And then I paused and I said, "That's fascinating. That's fascinating that I just let it roll off of me." And how many of us have thought that that's the better way, just
mhm,
letting it roll off of us instead of letting it move through us, which is what our
right.
emotions actually do. Because guess what? It doesn't just roll off of you. It's like creating little wounds that your body is fixing, is trying to go in and protect. I think instead of letting it roll off of you, let it move through you, because that is ultimately going to be the healthier way.
Right. And can you talk a little bit about that, letting our emotions move through us versus suppressing them, which is what most of us like to do, letting it roll off, being the person that doesn't let anything bother them, or being the person that's always reactive, but just angry, not really processing the emotion. That was me, either retreat or be angry, but not really process my emotions. So, can you just tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think this is one of the most beautiful things you shared on my podcast.
Mhm.
So, for anybody listening to this podcast, if you want to hear some real genius from Sally, you came on my podcast and you shared that our energy, our body, our energetic field is like a river, and that river has got to keep flowing and moving. Otherwise, what happens in a river that's not flowing, it gets stagnant. And that's a lot of times what's happening when we let things roll off of us. It's actually becoming stagnant in our body because it's not rolling off. It's like rolling in and getting stuck because we're
Mhm.
refusing to feel it. So it's not necessarily rolling off in the way that we think it is. We're actually just letting it get lodged somewhere. And it's better, because we want to be the river that is moving, to allow ourselves to feel it and to process it. And research shows that emotions, we feel them for 90 seconds. And I think that has been one of the things that has really supported me the most, is understanding that. And I would encourage your listeners, next time a emotion that you want to just let roll off, that you're used to just letting it roll off, let it move through, let yourself feel it, and let yourself just not withholding it and saying, I'm going to feel this for 90 seconds, but just notice what happens. Maybe you feel a little bit of jealousy. Maybe it's jealousy. Let's just reach for that word. Jealousy, you see somebody doing something and you might want to do it too. And so that starts to roll through instead of just being like, I'm not going to, that's a terrible thing to feel. I'm not going to feel jealousy. I'm going to push it off. I'm going to let that roll off of me. Let yourself feel jealous. Like, oh, that's interesting that I'm feeling this feeling of jealousy. Let yourself sit with it and watch it slowly dissipate as it moves away. Because emotions simply do move through us if we let them. Otherwise, it's going to end up either ping ponging off of you or it's going to get stuck somewhere in
But
you.
and it'll come back.
Yeah, and it boomerangs right back. Yeah.
It'll come back with
Ping pong
another
balls bounce.
with something else. Something else will have that emotion come back up and that feeling, and then we tell ourselves a whole story and we make it into this thing. And so, yeah, I 100% agree. And how many of us were told not to cry? Me anyway. And so it is important to allow that to flow and to move through us because we are energetic beings and it is just an emotion, right? It's a vibration. Let it move through you. And in the beginning, sometimes that's hard, and that's where coaches and guides come in because I needed someone. I still, I have a team. That's what I feel like. I have a team sometimes. Because I had years and years of not feeling my emotions. And so it's not always easy in the beginning to start to do that. But just sitting with it. And a word I love to use now, which I never used in the past, was curious. Get curious. Just what you said. Just get curious. What is this coming up? Why am I feeling like this? And allowing it to just move through you. So that's beautiful. Thanks for
Yeah.
sharing.
Curiosity is love. So allowing ourselves to be curious with something is an act of love. It's opening that door to connection with yourself because I think curiosity opens doors, whereas judgment closes them. So if we can allow ourselves to get curious and open up some doors a little bit and go in there and excavate without the judgment, or when we notice that we're judging, it's another like we just did with the jealousy. If you feel judgment, let that roll through you. Notice it, be aware of it, and the more we start to do that, the more we can start to separate ourselves from the emotions because you're not the emotions. That's an energetic thing that is rolling through your body. It's
Right.
just a wave.
Right. Right. And getting curious on when you have that disconnect or that jealousy or whatever that's coming up, like, for me now, I am able to say, okay, what's going on with me? Because it really has nothing to do with the other person, right? They may be killing it in business, they may be whatever it is they're doing. Um, it has nothing to do with them. It's really me. And it isn't to shame myself. It's more about like, okay, where's that disconnect? Is it a childhood thing? Is it something current? Is it a trigger? Something's triggering me with that person. Um, and so am I going to spend my energy on the self-loathing, which is what I used to do, or am I gonna spend my energy, because we have limitless amounts, am I gonna spend my energy on like, "Wow, I can do that too." Maybe they wanna collaborate. Like, there's so many things, positive things, and that does not mean that every day is rainbows and butterflies, but it is nice to reframe things and have a perspective. It does make it easier to connect, for me anyway. I have found because when you're in that disconnect mode, it really is hard to connect to anything around me if I'm always looking at it from that lens. So, reframing for me has helped.
Yeah, reframe 100% and staying away as much as we can from the word why, because why incites us to start to write stories around things and to simply witness. I think being the witness instead of asking why. And I do love to ask why. I'm a total toddler, and I think that
Too.
invites curiosity sometimes, but there's a difference between being open and being like, well, why am I doing this, why is this happening, and doing that kind of excavation, I think, can lead us into some of those eddies that we end up in. So I think
Yeah.
it's an open kind of curiosity that we're talking about here.
I was talking to a client, I think yesterday, and we were talking about partnership, and I was saying, and this is something I had to learn, is like, it seemed like, and I think this is a part of connection and disconnection too, is like, like someone has to be wrong for someone to be right. And that's not really true, but that's how I lived my life. Like, if I'm right, then he has to be wrong. And so being more curious, even in those areas, and boy, has that changed my connection to my partner, or in my relationships, like, can both be true? Like, can both things be true? And not being so stuck in the muck about like, oh, I have to be right. And that is again back to me being more curious about, interesting. Like that's not how I would see that, but I don't know. Could could that way work? Because there's multiple ways up the mountain, right? Some people are going to take this path, some people are going to take this path. The turtle's going to go really slow, but he's probably still going to get to the top. He might take the back of the mountain. So there's so many ways, and we are in a very polarized society now, right or wrong, right or left. That's a whole nother podcast, but look at the disconnect that's created, right? So can we leave, can the listeners think about that one thing? Like, can you be open to maybe both things could be right? We just look at
Yeah.
it differently, and what connection that brings. For me, that was a game changer.
That is a game changer. Sally, this reminds me of a story from a couple of weeks ago. My husband and I are baking a turkey for the very first time. Never baked a turkey in our entire lives. We moved very recently from Kansas, where we both grew up, where our families are, and to the West Coast. And so we're making our own turkey. We have no idea what the heck we're doing. And he was doing one thing and I was like, no, 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 no. The directions say this. And he's like, no, it's this and this. And we went back and forth. It's like 5 hours of making this dang turkey that we are just arguing and bickering back and forth. And at one point, I just had to come in here to my office and just take a few breaths. It's like, I just need to breathe and step away from him because we are arguing about this dang turkey that was free we didn't even buy this turkey. It was gifted to us outside of the outside of the grocery store. Like we hadn't even chosen to make this turkey, but I just had to come in here and take a
It
breath.
shows you.
It shows us. It shows us to teach us a very valuable lesson. And so I sit here and I breathe a couple of times and I get curious. And I noticed that there was this voice in my head that was saying, he's making me the bad guy. He's making me bad. And I'm good. So I had this kind of war. I'm like, oh, that's fascinating. What is this voice that's telling me that I'm bad? And like, what I realized as I sat here and breathed a little bit, it's like, I don't care if I don't care about being the good guy. I don't care about being the bad guy. I just want to make a turkey with the man who I love that is delicious and have fun. I just want to have fun. Like that's all that really matters. And it was in that moment of me just saying, I just want to have fun that I remembered that the label on the turkey had labeled it as a young turkey. It was like young something turkey. And I was like, why do grocery stores label their turkeys as young? What a weird thing to say. And I just had this funny thought and I instantly had to run out and share it with him. And I pulled out the label and I was like, why is this labeled as a young turkey? And we started laughing and it became an inside joke that we still laugh at about talking about like a young bird that came between us. So it was in the moment that I realized that this good and bad and right and wrong, that I found this fun and this opportunity for common ground, that it wasn't like I was seeking common ground. It simply came to me because I realized that those two things didn't matter. What really mattered was that we were having a good time. And I think about this in life. If we could all just realize what we're really here to do is have a good time, make the world a better place, connect with one another, and enjoy the spoils of this amazing planet that we live on and be part of it. Like that's what really matters. But we're so caught up. We're so caught up in this righteousness. And it's wild. It's
Yeah.
wild. It's not serving us.
No, no, no. And that's kind of a nice place to end. Is there anything else? Because we didn't even get into your breath work, so I would love to have you come back and really talk about all your breath work and how we're connecting to our breath these days and how beautiful that is. Um, but I don't want to keep you too long today. Um, so what are the like maybe two things that you would say to the listeners? That was beautiful what you just said. Um, any words of wisdom for them on connection?
Well, if you want to hear about breath work, again, you can go listen to Sally probably in this podcast anytime and also that episode of mine because that's specifically what we talked about. We talked a lot about why breath work is something that we care so much about. So I think it's totally cool that we didn't go there. I think we went to all the right places, turkeys included. I my big thing that I'm so passionate about is that we have freaking brilliance inside of us and we're so often we feel like we are unqualified to show up with it
Mm,
that is put inside of you the magic that is inside of you is meant for other people and when you offer it to other people, that is what is meant for you is that gift of receiving the joy of giving it to others. So it's when you show up in your full amazing magic that is here and available to you today because every experience that you've had has led you to this point. That is it. It's that connection point of you offering the magic and receiving it back. That's what we're here for. So I could just speak about it all day every day. In fact, I do about why
but
this matters so much and what you are doing with this podcast is an integral piece of helping people awaken to that connection that is inside of them. So, thank you for doing what you're doing.
I love it. That was really juicy. Love it. Jen, thank you so much for spending all this time with me today. And just let everybody know, um, this will be launching in January. So just let everybody know like what you're up to, where they can find you. I'll share all of Jen's information on the podcast. But if there's anything last things you want to share with the listeners,
Yeah, I'm sure you'll have my links in the show
I
notes. You
will.
can follow me. I'm Untethered Jen on Instagram. And if you're interested in checking out my offerings, you can go to jenliss.com. I've got my breathwork and my coaching offerings there as well.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. This was so much fun. I love chatting with you. And I think there's so much that we can bring to the world around connection and people stepping into their magic, as you say, and their medicine. So, nothing better than that. Thank you so much for today.
Thank you. So much fun.
All right. Thanks. Bye, everybody. Have a great day. See you soon.